A while back ago, I uploaded a YouTube short. That YouTube short was all about detailing every single super form that is involved in the main canon. And in my comments, I got a lot of people talking about, well, you missed this character, or you should not have included this character, and well, this one's canon. So you know what? I read through the comments and I decided, how about I make a new video, a longer video with more research put into it, talking about every single super form that's involved in Sonic the Hedgehog. From the canon ones to the non-canon ones to the Archie comics to the movies, I wanted to look at every single character who's had a super form. And that's what this video is all about. We're going to detail every single character who has had a super form in any Sonic canon. So, enjoy the video. In the background, you're going to see my Sonic Generations gameplay. And I'll be honest, I'm not as good as Sonic Generations as I am with Shadow Generations, but we needed something for the background. Now, with so many super forms and so many canons and so many ways to turn super, it can be a little confusing. So I decided to split this video up into categories to make it as easy to understand as possible. So this first category we're going to jump into involves characters that are in the game canon. So we're talking game canon first. They have to use the Chaos Emeralds to turn super, and they have to be involved in a story. Meaning they have to be involved in a cutscene or something, or were used story-wise, not just gameplay. Not just gameplay, but story-wise as well. So let's make this clear. They use the Chaos Emeralds to turn super, we're focusing on the game canon, and they have to be involved in the story. That's the first category we're going to dive into. Now obviously, the first character we're going to talk about, the most iconic character, the face of the series, is Sonic the Hedgehog himself. He's the first character who's ever gone super, of course. He turned super in Sonic 2. If you look at his concept art, you can clearly see he's based on this image from Dragon Ball. So it's clear to see the inspirations that existed between Super Sonic and Super Saiyans. Super Sonic is a mainstay of the series. He's appeared ever since Sonic 2 in a lot of medias and a lot of games. You know, he's in the next game after Sonic 3, he's in Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic 06, blah 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 blah. You know, he's in every single game basically. He's had a lot of story importance. You know, recently Sonic Frontiers used him for like every single boss, which was really cool to see. Now, the next character, of course, is Shadow the Hedgehog. Shadow the Hedgehog also has a super form, Super Shadow. Super Shadow first appears in Sonic Adventure 2, in which Sonic and Shadow both team up and both go super to stop the space colony Ark from crashing onto Earth. Along with that, Shadow also uses this form in his own game, Shadow the Hedgehog, in order to stop the Black Comet from crashing onto Earth. There's a lot of crashing onto Earth things in Sonic the Hedgehog. The next character is going to be interesting to talk about, and that's Silver the Hedgehog. So Silver the Hedgehog, of course, gets a super form in his own game as well in Sonic 06, and in that game, Sonic transfers his power onto Shadow and Silver. So then the three of them can work together and defeat Solaris in a really cool moment, you know. But as we all know, by the end of the game kind of erases itself from the timeline. So as a comment pointed out, they were asking me, well, does that mean Super Silver is canon then? Because if Sonic 06 erased itself from this timeline, has Silver ever gone super? And the answer is, yes, it still happens. Even if you don't want to count Sonic 06, it still happens in the IDW comics, which, to be clear, the IDW comics are canon. And, you know, Super Silver does appear in these comics during the end of the Metal Virus saga. Sonic and Silver both team up, they both go super, and that's how they stop the Metal Virus from, you know, contaminating the whole world. Okay, we talked about the three most iconic super forms, you know, Team Triple S. But who else has gone super using the Chaos Emeralds? Well, there's still a couple more examples. We have Trip the Sun Gazer. In Sonic Superstars, Trip is actually able to use all 7 Chaos Emeralds to turn into a super form? She turns into this dragon, this golden dragon thing, but I would consider it a super form because he uses the Chaos Emeralds and undergoes a transformation. So we'll consider it a super form, and essentially in this dragon form she can fly. I'm pretty sure she can shoot fire as well. It's pretty interesting how much of a different transformation she goes through, unlike Sonic, who just turns blonde and, you know, his hair shoots up. It's kind of funny. But that isn't the craziest transformation someone has gone through using the Chaos Emeralds. If you want to talk about crazy transformations, we gotta look no further than Chaos. You know, look at Perfect Chaos. He's a crazy, different design compared to normal Chaos. And I would consider Chaos a super form of sorts, because this is a transformation that happens when Chaos has all 7 Chaos Emeralds. You know, if you recall in Sonic Adventure, each time Chaos gets one Chaos Emerald, he changes a little bit. But by the end, when he has all 7 Chaos Emeralds, we get Perfect Chaos, who was a destructive god in a way. He destroyed Station Square completely. Perfect Chaos is no joke. But someone else who uses the Chaos Emerald for evil needs and, turns really different while using the Chaos Emerald is Gemerald. Gemerald actually can use the Chaos Emeralds and has turned into Ultimate Gemerald. And he was a really powerful enemy. In fact, Sonic and Eggman had to team up together to defeat Ultimate Gemerald. Sonic in his super form, and Eggman was just kind of there. But the two of them had to team up together to stop him. It's a crazy, crazy fight. Metal Sonic is also someone who can go super. In Sonic Mania Adventures, actually, Metal Sonic's able to absorb all 7 Chaos Emeralds to get this super form. He has this yellow glow to him, his eyes turn yellow, and he's really powerful, Even together, Sonic, Tails, Mighty, and Ray were struggling to defeat Metal Sonic here. But yeah, that should be everyone in this first category. Let me put up a picture of everyone just so we all get it clear. Here's everyone who can go super using the 7 Chaos Emeralds and are a part of the games. Let's dive into our second category. Now this next category is still continuing off the game canon, so we're still looking at the main canon stuff. But instead of those who use the Chaos Emeralds to turn super, we're going to look at those who use the Master Emerald to turn super. Because interestingly, there are some examples of that. Our first example is Mecha Sonic. So Mecha Sonic can actually use the Master Emerald to turn super. He does this in Sonic 3 while fighting Knuckles. And when he turns super, he actually gets a bit of a yellow glow. Despite that though, Knuckles, the powerhouse he is, the guy who was able to punch Sonic out of his super form, he defeats Mecha Sonic. No challenge. Come on, that's my go. Put respect on my go. And then of course we have Metal Sonic, who does this in the IDW comics as Neo Metal Sonic. Neo Metal Sonic's able to use the Master Emerald to turn into Super Neo Metal Sonic. He has the same appearance for the most part, except he turns yellow. And in this form, he's actually able to mop the floor with Sonic and Knuckles. It's bad. Until Shadow steps in, he actually he's actually able to fight him. Okay, Shadow's also my go-to. Let's not forget that. But yeah, that kind of clears this category already. We only have 2 characters here, and interestingly, both robot versions of Sonic, but they were both able to use the Master Emerald to gain a super form. And let's put the picture up, of course, to make sure we get it clear who's in this category, and let's get ready for our next category, everyone. Alright, everyone, we made it to our next category. We're still focusing on game canon, but we're going to talk about adjacent super forms. So this category is a little interesting. So with this category, we're still talking about game canon stuff, of course, those that are canon to the stories, but super forms that aren't technically super forms, but still exist and have the purpose of acting exactly like a super form. You'll get a better idea when we talk about each character, but hopefully that was enough explanation for the start. So our first character and the most perfect example of what I'm talking about is Blaze the Cat. Blaze the Cat has her own, quote-unquote super form, and that's Burning Blaze. First appears in Sonic Rush. She's able to harness the power of the Soul Emeralds to turn into Burning Blaze. So while not technically a super form, because it doesn't use, a Chaos Emerald or a Master Emerald, she uses the Soul Emeralds, and the whole point of Burning Blaze is to exist as a super form in a way. She plays exactly the same as a super form. She's as powerful as one. So that's why I put her in a category like this, because her super form is adjacent to, standard super forms like Super Sonic or Super Shadow. We also have a real crazy one, but a Super Eggman. Yes, you heard me, Super Eggman. With Super Eggman, he actually uses the Phantom Ruby, so, technically it's not real because it's an illusion, but still, this is a really cool design for a Super Eggman. He only appears in the Sonic Channel story though, so, this is kind of the only image we have of him. But yeah, if you guys didn't know, yes, there's technically a Super Eggman, but he uses the Phantom Rubies. Our next couple of examples aren't new characters, they're going to be Sonic and Shadow, so, let's discuss Shadow first, but a Doomwing Shadow. This first appears in Shadow Generations. This is when Shadow has, these massive wings, which I think these are really cool. This is a phenomenal design. But Doomwing Shadow plays exactly like a super form in a normal game. He can fly. His rings run down. You need 50 rings to transform into this form, and he's really powerful. So that's why I put him in a category like this, because really, the whole purpose of Doomwing Shadow is to exist as a super form. But technically, Shadow can't go super during the events of Generations because Sonic has most of the Chaos Emeralds. So, this was the proper solution to this, which really cool. You know, I hope these wings appear again somehow, some way. Then next we got Sonic, you know, the main man himself. First, let's discuss Dark Spine Sonic, who first appears in Sonic and the Secret Rings. This form is achieved through the rings of rage, sadness, and hatred, and you know, this Sonic's a little more aggressive, but I put him in this category because again, he exists to be a super form compromise. You know, he doesn't have the Chaos Emeralds here, but this form still allows him to fly, still allows him to be powerful. It's just an adjacent super form, you know, let's just be real here. Then of course we got the other storybook game, and that's Sonic and the Black Knight, where we have Excalibur Sonic. You know, this form happens through the use of all 4 sacred swords through the help of Excalibur, and Sonic gains this golden armor, golden glow, you know, golden color like Super Sonic, so you can tell, yeah, he exists to be a compromise to Super Sonic in this story. And again, same type of powers, you know, he can fly, he's really powerful, he's used to defeat the final boss, so that's why I put him in this category. Then, you know, Sonic again, we have Hypersonic. Hypersonic in a way is a power past Super Sonic. You know, Hypersonic happens in Sonic 3 and Knuckles when the Chaos Emeralds are empowered through the use of the Master Emeralds, so they turn into these things called Super Emeralds. And through Super Emeralds, Sonic's able to turn into Hypersonic, a much more powerful version of Sonic in this, you know, form past Super Sonic. The only issue, kind of only appears in one game, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, that's kind of it. We never really see it again. Who knows why? Who knows? Then of course though we have Super Sonic 2 in Sonic Frontiers, The Final Horizon. Kind of like Hypersonic in a way, where it's just you take Super Sonic and you go past that. You know, in Sonic Frontiers, Sage is able to help Sonic use his cyber corruption into power, which is where we get Super Sonic 2, which again, it's kind of Super Sonic but more powerful. So, and that should be it for this category. Let's put out the picture so we get all the characters here. Let's move on to the next one, everyone. This section's gonna be controversial. This section is called the I don't know section, because frankly, these characters I don't know if they are canon with their super forms. So let's make it clear we're still focusing on game stuff. But with these characters specifically, I'm not sure if they're considered canon. You know, some people will consider them canon, some people will consider them not canon. So it's not like I can even go out to research for sure on Google, hey, you know, are these characters considered canon with their super form? Because Google won't even give me a straight answer, but I digress. Let me explain further in this section. So in this section, I'm focusing on Tails, Knuckles, Amy, Mighty, and Ray. So let me split this section into two. One, explaining why people think these super forms are not canon, and then the other side will be explaining why people think it is canon. Let me explain the not canon first. For the most part, when you take these super forms into account for these characters, a lot of the time they only happen in the classic games and only happen gameplay wise. For example, take Sonic 3. You know, yes, you can go super with Tails and Knuckles in that game, but canonically, story wise, you know, it's Super Sonic who does the final boss, not Super Tails or Super Knuckles. Canonically, it's Sonic. Take Sonic Superstars for example. Yes, you can go super with everyone, but only Trip and Sonic really canonically story-wise go super. You know, Sonic in the final boss and then Trip in that one cutscene. The first time Amy goes super is in Sonic Origins, but, you know, she's more of a bonus character, you know. She's never canonically a part of these games except Sonic CD, and as we know in Sonic CD, she was just captured by Metal Sonic. So even then, her being here isn't even canon, much less her super form. You know, never in the modern games do you see these guys go super. I guess aside from Tails and Knuckles in Sonic Heroes. But even then, that's also controversial in itself, because some people think, well, this doesn't count as super forms. Some will count it, some won't, you know. But it's Sonic sharing his energy, you know, in his super form with Tails and Knuckles, and they gain this yellow orb around them. But okay, what about why people consider them canon? You know, what is there evidence to point to that? And honestly, I'd say there kind of is. For example, in Sonic Frontiers, you know, Knuckles mentions Super Knuckles by name.
Not bad. Things would have been over faster if I'd been Super Knuckles. You did alright.
Yeah, you keep telling yourself that.
Now, some people think maybe Knuckles is just joking, you know, he's pulling Sonic's leg by saying this, and, you know, it is true. That could be a possibility. Knuckles and Sonic do joke around with each other. But others say Knuckles is just name dropping a form he can actually do, which also, yes, could be a thing he can do. I don't know for sure. Another example, look at this. Super Tails has merch. Yes, Super Tails has a toy, officially licensed. That's kind of crazy to me. And then lastly, my big piece of evidence here, and this was pointed out to me in the comments. Look at this cutscene in Sonic Mania. If you notice what I notice, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Mighty, and Ray all go super to escape, the building that's kind of blowing up right now. But the point is they all go super during a cutscene. This isn't just gameplay, this is an actual cutscene. Which helps point to the fact that they all have super forms. Now, I think that's the biggest piece of evidence right there. Now, this kind of does exclude Amy. She's not even a part of this game, which is weird. I don't know why she's not a part of the game, but I digress. So the point is, at least, we have evidence that maybe points to Knuckles, Tails, Mighty, and Ray having super forms, canonically. And Amy, at least for now, it's kind of more in a gray area. But I don't know, it's just all kind of confusing if you ask me. If they do have super forms, why don't they use them in modern games? What's stopping Sega from using them in modern games? Especially Knuckles. Knuckles has a tie with the Master Emerald. Why can't he go super regularly? But yeah, let's just move on to the next category. Let me throw up the picture so we all know all the characters involved here, and let's just move on. Okay, we moved timelines. We're away from the games now. Let's talk about the movie canon. And, we don't got many examples, but they're still pretty interesting to talk about. And our first example is actually a Super Eggman. Again, Super Eggman. But this time he's real. This isn't a Phantom Ruby. Super Eggman happens in Sonic 2. When Eggman steals the Master Emerald, while Sonic and Knuckles are distracted, he uses the Master Emerald to turn super. He gets this green color to him, this black and green color to him, and in this power he's actually able to build the Death Egg robot. Really cool stuff. By the end of things, he gets super form punched out of him, by Knuckles, like what Knuckles did in the game Sonic 3 to Super Sonic. Meaning our next super form is then Super Sonic, who then appears in Sonic 2 as well. And for this to happen, the Master Emerald actually shatters, it breaks, and out comes the Chaos Emerald. Using the Chaos Emeralds, Sonic then turns Super Sonic, and with this power, he's able to defeat the Death Egg robot, no problem. Then lastly, of course, we got Super Shadow, who appears in Sonic 3. Super Shadow and Super Sonic have this generational fade. That fight was really sick, especially watching it in the movie theater. But by the end of things, the two of them work together to stop the giant laser from the Eclipse Cannon destroying Earth, and that's the end of super forms for now, in this movie universe. They look really gorgeous. I love the way the super forms look in these movies. Let's put up the image on screen so we know who's here. And let's move on to our next universe, next category. For this next category, I wanted to talk about the Fleetway comics. In these comics, there's a Super Sonic who is very different than your average Super Sonic. The Fleetway comics have a Super Sonic who first appeared in issue 7, and this super form happens mainly when Sonic's in really angry and stressful situations, and he's evil. Okay, this guy's straight up evil. He will kill anyone. This Super Sonic is like an evil, twisted version of Sonic. You can see it in his eyes. But essentially, when Sonic turns super, he has no memory of what happens in his super form when he, turns back to normal. Because this Super Sonic's evil. He's a monster. Okay, he will just try to destroy everything and anything in his way. He's just an evil version of Sonic. Nothing like the average normal Sonic. That's kind of it for this category, so let's put up the image and let's get ready to move on to our next category. This next category is going to be really short, but it's an interesting one, and it's from the Sonic Adventures comics. Let's not to be confused with the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog or Sonic Adventure the game. This is a whole separate thing. But in this comic, it actually features an Echidna society way before Sonic Adventure even introduced, the whole Echidna clan thing. But essentially in this comic, Sonic has a super form, the Golden Armor, which is gained by clearing the Echidna special stage, and yeah, that's pretty much it. He turns into Super Sonic, looks like this, and yeah, let's just move on. Let me throw up the image on the screen to get everyone here in just one character, and let's get on to our next category. Oh boy, this one's gonna be a doozy. We're finally stepping into the Archie comics, and they have a lot of characters who can go super. So obviously, first of all, issue 4, Super Sonic. He appears by using the 7 Chaos Emeralds, 50 Power Rings, standard stuff. Super Sonic's really powerful. You got him right here. Looks exactly the same as he does in the game. There's no changes like that really. So yeah, our next character is Hyper Knuckles. He appears fully pink. He first appears in Super Sonic versus Hyper Knuckles. Those two have an all-out fight, in their super forms during that whole issue. It's actually really cool to see. I wish we had more super fights like this. Then we have a Super Tails, who first appears in issue 66. Doesn't look that different. We also have a Turbo Tails. He kind of just has a cape, I guess, but he's still powerful. He still acts like a super form, so that's neat. Next we have a Super Shadow, first appears in 169. Again, it's just really the same stuff. Like, he looks exactly the same. He has the same powers, except, because this is Archie, all these characters are a little more powerful. But yeah, this is just Super Shadow. Pretty powerful, pretty cool looking, all that. Next we have our original character for Archie, Master Mogul. First appears in issue 56. And what's interesting about him is he actually doesn't use the Chaos Emeralds, but will steal others' Chaos energy. By stealing their energy, this allows him to get into, his Master Mogul form. Then of course we have a Super Scourge, who first appears in issue 195. And what's interesting about him is, unlike Sonic, who uses the Chaos Emeralds, he actually uses the Anarchy Barrels. Due to using these Anarchy Barrels, he's been able to turn into this form, Super Scourge. It's a real crazy design. As much as I despise Sonic EXE, the design kind of just does give off that vibe a little bit, mainly with the eyes. Come on, you can't tell me you don't see it. But what's interesting about Super Scourge is, unlike Sonic, who kind of gets a boost of energy after he's done using his super form, when Super Scourge is done using his super form, he's done. He's all tired. He loses every single bit of energy. So, it's really easy to then defeat him afterwards. Then lastly, or I would think lastly, let me know if I missed anyone, but we have Super Atom. Super Atom only appears in one issue, 169, and he's a super form of Atom while using the nanites that control Tommy the Turtle's body. Tommy the Turtle in the comics is like, Sonic's old best friend, but he kind of got like, as I just said, there's nanites controlling his body, and then we get this super form, and yeah, crazy stuff. We also have a Super Mega Man. Yes, you heard me. Mega Man not only is in these comics, but also was able to use a super form. Just look at this image. Sonic and Mega Man both super. That's a really cool sight to see. Alright, let's throw up the image. That's everyone for Archie. There's one more category, but this is going to be real easy, and that's Sonic X. I'm not going to talk too much in detail because it's really just easy to talk about, but Sonic X features 2 super forms, real standard stuff. It's just Sonic and Shadow, both of them in their super forms, both of them look the same, act the same, all that. I guess to dive a little bit into what's interesting is mainly with Super Sonic, we have this early design. A lot of you might know him as Nazo, from the fan movie Nazo Unleashed. But yes, Nazo came from this early design in Sonic X. We don't really know what this is, but a lot of people theorize this could be what Sonic X was gonna make Super Sonic look like, which is weird. If this is what Super Sonic was gonna look like, good thing he actually looks like normal Super Sonic. But yeah, that's it for Sonic X. Let's throw up the image and let's conclude this video. Hopefully I got everyone. That was a lot of characters to talk about. Let me know if I did miss anyone. I think I got everyone. Come to my comments, let's talk, let's discuss. Especially the whole talk about who's canon and who's not canon for having super forms, like, Super Knuckles or Super Tails and all that. But yes, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if you guys have any ideas of what I could do next, and make sure you like, subscribe, follow, all of that. Peace.